Yeah. All right, next screen. All right. Welcome, everybody. For those who haven't registered at the back desk there next to Mark, feel free to register your details and grab a name tag. Abuna, can you start us off?
The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit.
Has everyone got a worksheet? There's some worksheets that we're going to be using for you to take notes down. So if you need to grab a worksheet, Mary's at the back there. She's on the whole stewardess thing, you know. So, one per couple, yeah. And there are also there's some journals left over from last time, Mary. Yeah, some journals left over. So if you didn't receive a journal last time, please grab one. We're very excited, Mary and I are very excited to be presenting this talk together based on the book Sacred Marriage by Gary Thomas. This book really is a staple in every Christian family's library, or should be at least. Mary and I have made it a habit to try and give it to all newly married couples as a wedding gift alongside with our gift, just to kind of, how much... because we benefited so much from reading it ourselves. We actually read it before we got married. And even though it didn't, diminish the challenges that we faced as a married couple, it kind of helped put us in a good place, in a good stead to be able to kind of, face those challenges or come across them with a certain, godly perspective. So it's a 3-part series that we're going to be starting off today. We're doing part 1, and then over the next month we'll be doing part 2, and then Raouf will be continuing on part 3 later. Part 1 today is going to be called Marriage, a Doorway. So we'll explore that together today. And it's essentially discussing whether marriage is delightful or difficult. Your marriage is a doorway, and it's a doorway to a closer walk with God and to a spiritual life that shapes you into the likeness of Christ. Next month we will be continuing on. If you guys haven't booed us off the stage, we'll come back and continue on Marriage, a Classroom, talking about more the relationship between spouses. So today is how marriage aims to get us to be connected towards God. And then from next time, it's going to be how we can relate to each other and prove that love to God practically. Following on from there, on the 7th of July, a couple of months later, Raouf will then talk about marriage, sex, saints and salvation, and get into some heavy stuff, so that'll be really interesting. Okay. I'll leave that one for Raouf. So, you're on.
I'm on.
No, not yet.
Yeah, I am.
What about this one?
You skipped over it.
Oh, can I go back to it? Yeah, can you go back to it? Okay. Cool. Sorry, I missed the slide. Okay. So basically, the ultimate purpose of this book is really to equip us to love God more. This is not kind of a practical set of steps, as in if you do this, you'll have a successful marriage. 10 steps to a happy marriage, or 5 ways to get your wife to do everything that you want her to do, or it's not quite like that. It's kind of looking at the intentions and the depths of the relationship and trying to kind of change our hearts. It's to help us develop our heart for marriage and really understand what gives us true fulfillment in marriage. It's really what gives us true fulfillment. And you'll get to discover today that maybe happiness, our idea of being happy, and marriage to be happy, is not necessarily what we really should be aimed or focused at. And we really need to maybe focus on having true fulfillment in our hearts with God. I want to remind everyone today that we are here to listen with our ears and not with our elbows. So what I mean by that is we'll be hearing a lot of stuff where we'll be like, did you hear that? Did you hear that? Yeah, all right. Make sure you're listening. All right. And the temptation will be there. Keep your elbows to yourself and just listen with your ears. We'll be breaking up the talk today into 3 separate sections. Mary will start with the first, and then we'll break up into couples and work through a worksheet to discuss some of the things that we've discussed today in the presentation. We'll be applying them to our own marriages. So listen carefully, because a lot of the stuff that you'll hear in the presentation you'll need later on to delve into when you have our breakout session for personal discussion. So with no further ado, let me pass you on to my wonderful wife, Marianne. Please give her a hand.
Thank you. Do I think I need to swap mics. For those of you who don't know me, let's be honest, you all know me. Marianne Soulier. So thanks for being here. It's just like an incredible turnout. Makes me a little bit nervous, so stay with me while I get my mic. So I'm going to cover the first section. We deliberately did it in sections, like Ange on, Marianne sit down, Marianne on, Ange sit down, because you know what would have happened if we were both up here, right? You guys would have seen our marriage, okay? We would have talked over each other, corrected each other, so we thought we better be graceful since the talk is about being holy and do it in sections. So I hope you don't mind the swapping and starting. So the section I'm going to talk about, getting into the book, so Angie's already covered that we're going to be looking closely at the book and closely at looking at how our marriages are a doorway to becoming holier people, not necessarily happy. Okay, I know a lot of people get into marriage thinking it's going to be happily ever after, but Christianity and our orthodoxy says that it's actually going to be a bit more deeper than that. Okay, so we're going to get into it. So the book does say marriage is a doorway, and it's a doorway to a closer walk with God and to shape you into Christ's likeness and image. Okay, why is it a doorway? Okay, let's get into that. I think it's a doorway because, number one, and I will say this emphatically when I get the slide, husband, wake up. Okay, yes. Marriage is a doorway leading to fulfillment from a perfect God, not an imperfect spouse. Okay? I almost want everybody to kind of repeat that with me. I know, stay with me. Marriage is a doorway leading to fulfillment from a perfect God, not an imperfect spouse. Now, before anybody objects and tells me that their spouse is perfect, I will not believe you, okay? So most of us, as you know, we got into our current marriages because we fell in love. Hey? Oh, we got paid, yeah, we got an expensive ring. Most of us fell in love because of this notion of romance. So, I don't know, I was lucky enough to fall in love on a tropical island, true story, when Ange bought me a mocktail in Fiji. But for some of you, it might have been, I don't know, you met at the youth meeting or you walked past each other at a, I don't know, resurrection dinner, someone in the room. I'm trying to think of other stories that I know that I can dish out. Someone introduced you. Anyway, you get the point. We all fell in love and got married because of this notion of romance, okay? And we all expected that romance to, what? Last forever. Okay, and we have wonderful expectations of our spouse. So if I asked any of you before you got married, or even today, what's wonderful about your spouse, I'm sure you'll be able to list 10 or 3 or 1 thing, at the very least, about what's so wonderful about your spouse, okay? I know for me, something that really attracted me to Ange was how laid back he was, apart from his hair, of course, how laid back he was. He was so chill. Okay, and for anyone who knows me, I'm not chill. So I was like, this is cool, you know, like I think this is what I need. As many of you then discover into your marriages that the very thing you fell in love with becomes the very thing that annoys you the most. So now his chill is actually, you're so cool, you're like a freezer. Okay, you know, it's frustrating and stressful, and I'm sure you can each think about what it is for your marriage. Nobody say anything. Okay, so the point is you get back from the honeymoon, really eventful, intoxicating, fun time, and what awaits you after the honeymoon? Laundry and budgets and dirty socks on the floor and I don't know, what else awaits you? Housework and visiting the in-laws. There's no romance in that. Let's be honest, there's no romance in that. And what starts to happen is our rose-coloured glasses, you know, pink and hazy with love, start to turn into magnifying glasses. And you start picking on each other a bit. And what you start noticing is this person I'm living with, not so perfect after all. maybe they have some weaknesses, or maybe they chew loudly and they literally, I have to leave the room. I'm having a go at him, but he's going to get the mic soon, and I'm sure you're going to hear all about my annoying traits. Allegedly, I apparently want to talk at night, and allegedly that is annoying. Like, come on. Okay, so what I'm getting at is we all sort of start to pick on each other a little bit and find out that our partner isn't perfect and they have weaknesses. So actually, scientists and neuropsychologists have a name for this term. It's called limerence. So the process of falling in love and those beautiful feelings, called limerence. And like all psychologists, they kind of put a damper on things sometimes, huh, Mary? And they say limerence, that feeling, only lasts somewhere between 18 and 24 months. So then what happens, guys, after those feelings kind of fade? What are we left with? Hey? No limerence. That's right. We go from wanting to be in each other's arms to wanting to kind of wring each other's necks at times. Actually, a lot of people report that sometimes as intensely as they love their partners can be as intensely as they hate their partners at times. I know. Well, none of us are going to admit to that, but it's true if you look in your heart. Okay, so we all have this focus, and guys, the society out there doesn't really make it easy, because everything we hear, either in romantic comedies or on Married at First Sight, is that all we need in life to be happy is to find the one, okay? Now, as much as Married at First Sight is addictive, and I cannot turn my eyes from the screen, it does unfortunately make a bit of a mockery of marriage in terms of the Christian sense, okay? So we also love weddings, guys. Who here doesn't love a wedding? Nobody loves a wedding? We all love weddings. Like, even when you're like walking in the city and you see people like getting photographed for their wedding, what do? Naturally you stop and and you think it's just such a happy day. And if you're anything like the people who warned us before we got married, seriously, when we were engaged, people would come up to us and they'd be like, enjoy it now, while it lasts, right? And we used to think, oh my God, it sounds like we're going to war or something. Like, what are these people tripping on, you know? Like, no, we're not going to be that couple. We're not going to be that couple. We're different. We're going to be in love forever. Insert laughter. Now I'm that couple. I'm like, congratulations on your engagement. Enjoy it while it lasts. Here's a book that you should read. Yeah, so that's how it goes. So unfortunately, when we think our spouse is perfect, or when we think of ourselves as perfect, or when we place an unreasonable expectation on our marriage that it's going to keep us happily ever after, we're going to fall on our face, essentially. We all know this because we've all been there. Everybody has a moment in their marriage where they realise, my partner isn't perfect. He or she is no longer making me happy. Well, not all the time anyway, okay? The book says here, this beautiful quote, romantic love has no elasticity to it. It can never be stretched, it simply shatters. Mature love, the kind demanded of a good marriage, must stretch, as the sinful human condition is such that all of us bear conflicting emotions. Sorry, my voice is a bit nervous. I don't know why, I present all the time. Anyway, so ultimately, thank you. Ultimately, guys, we're two broken people living in a broken world, and we're trying to have a perfect marriage. You guys can see that the impossibility of that is, sets us up for failure and disappointment and hurt, okay? So in the absence of happiness, and I'm not saying you should have a miserable life, okay? But there's got to be something else. Why would God create us and say, hey, it is not good for men to be alone. Here's your spouse, here's the one. Get married, this is my commandment to you, and I'm going to bless this marriage, and then make us miserable. Why would he do that? It's because I believe, and the book says also, that he does that because he wants us to become holy, okay? Not to necessarily be happy. Does that then mean if you have a bit of a difficult marriage or a bit of a challenging time in your marriage, that is also designed for your holiness? I feel like someone might throw something at me. What do you guys think? If we presuppose that God intended us to be holy, then even our challenges, even our challenging partners, even our difficult times are designed for us so that we can grow more and more closer to God. Okay? So really, it's a bit of a mindset shift. It's moving away from what the world tells us, that it's all about happiness and joy and ever after and the fantasy, and moving more towards what God is trying to show us. Okay? All right, stay with me. The thing is, when we start to get to this point of realizing our partner's not perfect, what we naturally do as humankind is say, did I marry the wrong person? And we start to break apart and tear apart the person that we're with instead of looking at what? Yeah, have you guys ever heard the saying that when you point your finger at someone, where is your other finger pointing? Back at you. Yeah. So it's kind of that premise. We never really say, hold on, yeah, the person I'm married to isn't perfect, but I'm not perfect either. Okay? I'm also not a perfect person. I'm also broken, trying to heal myself, trying to fill my life with God. And I'm also on this journey with another broken person. We're trying to do this thing together. Okay? So that's the point I'm trying to get at. So that's romance and expectation. Sorry, honey, can you click? Oh, still going. So what happens? Okay. We arrive at this crossroads in our relationship when our ideas around perfection and happiness break down. We kind of see couples in one of these three areas. There could be a fourth or fifth, but these are the three that I could think about. And I want you to kind of reflect in your mind if you're in one of these areas at the moment, okay? Couples continually try to continue to create the romance. So they're always trying to rekindle that fire with each other when they realise the fire's kind of gone out. Or worse, no one in this room, but we go outside our marriage to look for someone to have those feelings with again. I know that's hopefully no one in this room, okay? But that's one of the things that can happen. Another thing that can happen is we enter this marital guerrilla warfare, okay? And sometimes it's not even outward guerrilla warfare, it's kind of under the surface, okay? What does that mean? We start to blame each other. If not outwardly, definitely in our own mind. Like, yeah, the reason why I shout all the time is because he's bad and he gets under my skin. I don't know who, yeah, I'm just hypothesizing. This isn't about me at all. Or we start resenting them. Like, I can't believe you've done that. Again, the socks are on the floor. Is the laundry basket, is it too hard? Do I need to put signs all the way down the hallway? Laundry basket here, laundry basket here. You know, we start to sort of get into that quarrelling and unconscious like resentment towards our spouse, okay? And we blame them. That's kind of the crux of this. Underneath it all, we really blame them. We think everything is kind of their fault. And the third area is that couples just decide to kind of get along. You know, we've got kids, or we go to church, or we're really involved in each other's families, so we wouldn't want to run the risk of anyone knowing we had any issues, so we'll just get along like kind of friends under one roof. Okay, so you sort of end up in one of those three areas, or maybe a combination of both. Okay, is anyone relating to this, or is it just me? Okay, good. All right, let's keep going. It's just you, somebody said. Thank you. All right. All righty, I should hand the mic over. Yeah, okay, so we end up at this crossroads, guys. And we need to basically grieve the death of romance, okay? As a couple, we need to grieve the death of romance, and we need to now look for something else, something deeper, and go deeper and say, okay, we don't want to stay in one of these three places, okay? For those of you who are newly married, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, I'm foretelling your future. But isn't it better that you know this now? Yes, okay. All the other people are laughing, right? I don't know, like they can relate on some level. Okay, so let's talk about how. How do we get over this romance and grieve it and move on to something deeper with God? Okay, the first thing is we actually need to admit to ourselves, honestly, that there is a deep ache in our hearts to be loved. Because this idea that someone's going to marry me, sweep me off my feet and fill me up comes from this need within us that we all have to be loved, okay? It's like a deep ache. But that deep ache was created in us, or allowed to live in us, not for us to long for someone else to fill it. What was it created for? It's rhetorical. Yeah, for God, okay? So that we would always have a yearning within ourselves to be in communion with Him, okay? Yes, please. Okay, so the ache can only be filled with God. He alone fills our deepest parts. He alone is the answer. And really, it's as difficult and as simple as that, okay? Everyone, it's really that simple. Whatever you're looking for your spouse to fill you, whatever you think has left your marriage, really is something inside you, between you and God. And until you feel that, you'll be in that cycle. You know those 3 areas? Going around, trying to rekindle the fire, kind of having a big argument, resenting each other, being at war, maybe getting along for the sake of the kids for a while, and then so we start again, okay? So God actually tells us, seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you in Matthew 6. He actually tells you, until you seek me, then and only then will all these things come to you. Will you be fulfilled, okay? And there's other beautiful verses that I won't kind of read from the Psalms. Okay, number 2. So what was number 1 again? Admit what? Someone say, admit that. Come on. Yeah, that we have a deep ache within us to be loved. Number 2 is we actually need to let our spouse off the hook. We really do. We need to, inside our heart, say, you know what, I get it. This person also has that ache. This person also is broken, as in is looking to fulfill their needs from God. And I need to let them off the hook. I need to say, it's actually okay that you can't be everything to me, okay? Because the truth is, if you're not aligned in your walk with God, if you're not filled by God, there isn't a single relationship on the planet, even your kids, that is going to fulfill you. So sometimes what happens, and I'm very new to parenthood, so I'm not speaking from experience, but so I hear, especially from the older generation of parentals, that, you know, when things aren't so great in marriage, they do what? They become absorbed with the kids. And the kids become their focus of attention. And it's a beautiful thing, but can also be very unhealthy too. Because what ends up happening when the kids move out? Empty nest. Or worse, you try to move in with them. There are mothers that try to do that. No! Yeah. They just have trouble letting go, okay? Because they become kind of obsessed with the kids and trying to fill that ache with the children, okay? It's really important that no relationship in your life can fill that part of you that only God can fill, okay? All right, so the third thing. So what was that? What was that point? Who do we need to let off the hook? Thank you. All right, there is going to be a quiz at the end. Okay. All right, the third thing is we actually need a spiritual shift. So something similar to a mindset shift. You know, we talk a lot in society about having a mindset shift. This is kind of the same thing, but at a spirit level. We need to have a spiritual shift, okay, in our hearts. So, and that shift is to actually say, I get it now. It's not about romance. It's not about happiness. It's actually not even about being comfortable. Sometimes it's even about it being difficult and really hard, okay? And we need to accept the challenge and say, okay, I get it. There's a need in me that I need to fill only with God. Now I'm going to let my spouse off the hook. Oh boy, now I need to look inside myself and have a spiritual shift, because I realise my spouse is not going to do it for me. And until I do this, I'm going to be in that cycle all over again. So you need to own it, okay? That's really what this is about. So you need to own that the situation that you're in, whoever you're married to, however wonderful they are, you will face challenges, okay? You will see the other person's imperfection. You will have moments of when you'll resent them or even hate them. You'll have moments where you don't even like yourself sometimes, okay? And until you accept that rather than discarding that relationship or rather than doing away with it or challenging it or asking for more, that you're going to have a spiritual shift within yourself, then I'm sorry to say, you're going to stay in the same place. Okay? I know, it's a hard truth. Hard for me to even say it to myself sometimes, okay? I'm in the same boat as you guys. I am. I'm in one of those places. And now that there's a baby involved, they tried to warn me about that too, guys. I didn't listen, of course. I was going to be the only parent in the world that was still going to make time for date night, that was still going to make time for my relationship. Okay, I'm laughing. Sorry to the newlyweds in the room. I keep breaking these hard truths to you. I apologise. Okay, so what were the three things? What were the three things? Admit that you have an ache in your heart. That only who can feel? Okay, beautiful. And the second point? Yeah, probably one of the most important points. I can see some elbows. Let me off the hook, dude. Yeah. And part 3? Have a spiritual shift. Okay. Next, Angelos. All right, back to Ange, everybody, for section number 2. Any questions about anything I've covered? No. Okay. Oh no, he's going to destroy me now. Okay. Yes. Oh yeah. Go. Oh. Sorry, this is disruptive. Sorry. I don't know what to do.
Sorry guys, we're just recording the talk for online, those who couldn't make it today to be able to watch online. Welcome to everyone that's out there on the web. Yeah. Okay. So far we've mentioned that marriage is a doorway to holiness, a doorway to a relationship with God, focusing on the fact that our spouse can't fulfill that inward desire or that inward emptiness that we're looking to fill. The second thing we're going to talk about now is that marriage is a full-length mirror to expose your sins. It's all very rather grim, unfortunately, but it all comes with a positive outlook. Marriage is a full-length mirror. So there's a lovely verse from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, which says, and I'm just going to kind of pick part of it, but St. Paul says, "For this is the will of God," okay, halfway through the page there, "for this is the will of God, your what? Your sanctification." And then a few verses down he says, "For God did not call us to uncleanness, but in what? Holiness." Two key words in that passage, sanctification and holiness, which both pretty much mean the same thing, okay? Holiness is for us to be set apart. And that's what the whole premise of this book's all about. It's for us to pursue God, not necessarily in the context, and Marianne will talk about this in the next passage, but God wants to use marriage as a vehicle, okay? It's a vehicle to drive our spiritual growth. And that's what it's all about, that, you know, most of us have chosen marriage rather than celibacy, and marriage in and of itself can be a vehicle for God to achieve His will in us, which is our holiness and our sanctification. Next slide. The great thing about marriage is it helps us to see a hidden part of ourselves, hence being the mirror. I love this quote, which says, "One of the best wedding gifts God gave you was a full-length mirror called your spouse. Had there been a card attached, it would have said, 'Here's to helping you discover what you're really like.'" Okay. Unfortunately, when we're single, okay, before we get married, there are a lot of things about ourselves that we don't really see, like, you know, a blind side, or a blind spot that we can't really see. And it's not until we start living with a person day in, day out, in a very close relationship, that they get to see a very close part of us that we necessarily either didn't see, or maybe we completely disregarded, or we knew about it but we didn't really think it was a big deal. And then once you start to live with that person, it comes to the surface. And it's quite confronting, because from our perspective, this is something that we really didn't want to share or we didn't really want to acknowledge, and now we have to. You know, I can speak for myself. There are certain things that when I was growing up, I felt like it wasn't really a big deal. And then being married to Marianne, it came to the surface and I thought, oh, okay, maybe God's calling me to realize that this is actually a bigger deal than I thought it was. Or maybe God is calling me to a greater level of holiness than I actually expected for myself. And as difficult as confronting it is, it helps you, and it helps you to become a better person. And that's one of the purifying and the cleansing things about marriage, that it's a mirror in that regard. So it becomes a way for me to grow. Okay, how can I grow in courage, in patience, in perseverance? If I'm a particularly controlling person, for example, maybe God's telling me just, you know, chill out and just, you know, lay off a little bit. If I'm very passive or I'm very critical, it's a good way for God to highlight that in my life through my spouse. Okay. Next page. Okay. So marriage gives me accountability. Okay, it gives me accountability, and it helps us to be able to kind of see ourselves in a different way. It holds up a mirror to our sin. It forces me to face myself honestly and consider my character flaws, my selfishness, any anti-Christian attitudes, encouraging me to be sanctified and cleansed and to grow in godliness. Now, unfortunately, what tends to happen is when we find out certain things about ourselves, the initial instinct is either to get defensive, to try and defend ourselves and say, no, this is the reason why I'm acting this way. Or no, you don't understand. It's because you act this way, and so I have to then behave in this manner. Okay, and so we become defensive and we try and justify ourselves. Or for some of us, the instinct is to then run away. Okay, to run away and to either not invest in the marriage, to just, you know, focus on work or, you know, hobbies or sports or whatever it is and just not really be invested, or to actually physically run away and not be there. But unfortunately what happens with that is when we run away, we don't just run away from our spouse. We run away from the potential growth that God has in plan for us, but we even run away from ourselves. And some people may say, well, I'll go and find someone who doesn't treat me this way, or someone who can accept this about me, or someone who's the right person for me that isn't, you know, so, you know, difficult like that. But then we don't change because that part of us, it doesn't go anywhere and it's still within us. And so rather than acknowledging it, confessing it, repenting about it, and then transforming, we're continually on the run. That's why you have people that, you know, get married several times and move from one person onto the other, like the Samaritan woman, for example, or lots of, you know, A-listers and celebrities and so on. Yeah. Did I miss a slide? Okay. A really good point when we're talking about this is that we've talked about marriage being a full-length mirror to expose our sin. But we've got to realise that there's also going to be a potential for resentment when my spouse acknowledges my sin. You know, I'm going to kind of want to blame them for feeling this way, or I'm going to want to retaliate. But please try and focus on yourself and not blame, like Marianne was saying. The other aspect of it, I guess, comes down to, well, there are going to be certain things that I see about my spouse that I'm going to, you know, be in a position where I have to share or expose my spouse's sin. And that's a really difficult situation because you want to be gentle. So for all of us who are, you know, who think it's our responsibility to point out each and every one of our spouse's faults, okay, look at yourself first and see what you can change about yourself. But when you are in a position to help your spouse or highlight certain things, be gentle with how you do it. Don't hold something against them, you know. If there's something that they have acknowledged to you that they need to work on, be like a personal trainer or a coach. You know, how many personal trainers do you find that when you go to the gym and try and work out with them, They slam you and they put you down. They say, "Come on, get down and give me 20, you fat slob." Okay? It's not like that. They're there to motivate you and to build you up. Okay? So that's the whole idea with us in our relationships with our spouse. It's an opportunity for us to help them grow rather than to ridicule them or bring them down with what they're telling us. And it's a huge opportunity for vulnerability as well. And vulnerability is something that we don't really do much. We all try and protect ourselves and insulate ourselves. But it's a great opportunity for us to be vulnerable. Adam and Eve, when they were in the Garden of Paradise, they were naked and unashamed. Okay? But when sin entered between them, that's when they covered themselves and they hid. So now that we are being reunited through the reconciliation that God has given us, and we have been united through the Holy Spirit, it's an opportunity for us to let down our guard. It's an opportunity for us to be vulnerable to one another. Tell your spouse about your struggles. And that will promote not only trust, it'll help promote intimacy. It'll help to promote openness between you. There's two lovely quotes here that I'd like to share from Gary Thomas. And he says, "I don't believe couples fall out of love, they fall out of repentance." They don't fall out of love, they fall out of repentance. And that's really striking, because the romantic feelings will eventually end. And even though we are talking about happiness not being as important as holiness, we all want a sense of fulfillment. Okay? But at some point down the track, you're going to find that those feelings have started to wane. And so then what it comes down to is me looking at myself and saying, am I loving my wife the way that God intended me to love her? And my wife is thinking, am I submitting to my husband the way that the church submits to Christ? And it's a very high level for us to aim towards, but if I'm not achieving that, which we all are aiming towards, and I don't think anyone of us has achieved that, then it's a time for us to go back and reflect and go, well, rather than me thinking I'm better off, without her, I should be going back and thinking, no, actually, have I been stepping up to the mark that God has called me towards? And that's what holiness is. It's a perfection in Christ. And so Gary says, from a personal perspective, he says, whenever marital dissatisfaction threatens your relationship, it's time to check your focus. The times I'm happiest and most fulfilled in my marriage are the times I'm intent on drawing meaning and fulfillment from becoming a better husband rather than from demanding a better wife. Raouf mentioned last time there's a really good book by Jordan Peterson called 12 Rules for Life. And Jordan Peterson mentioned something very interesting. He says a concept called say no to happiness. In this modern world, we're all so focused on happiness, and that's why the rates of depression are so high, because everyone just wants happiness. And we're all looking for superficial ways to get that happiness. But somewhere in between chaos and order, there's a really fulfilling place. Okay? It's a place of meaningfulness and a place of fulfillment that is much, much, much better than happiness. And it's, in the Christian perspective, it's a place of holiness. And that's what we need to aim towards. That place of holiness, which is far, far better than happiness. And that comes with struggle, it comes with difficulties, but you can only get there through that. So back to our role model, our Lord Jesus Christ. St. Paul says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her. And then later on, it says, not having any spot or wrinkle or any such blemish, but that she should be what? She should be what? Holy. There's that word again. Should be holy and without blemish. So, husbands, if you really love your wife, okay, you want to see her become more Christ-like in purity and sanctification. And wives, if you really love your husbands, you want to see them grow in godliness. And so we're both encouraging each other towards that, okay, towards that throughout our marriage. And I'll pass you on to Marianne now, who will talk about part 3, which is Gateway to an Arena.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ange. While I get the mic back on, I'm just going to get you smiling again, because as a presenter, you see everybody's face, and this is what you're kind of looking like now. Right? So everybody turn to the person next to you and show your gummiest smile. Come on. Yes. All right. Okay, back at the top of the room. We've got 5 minutes left, so you're only going to listen to me for another 5 minutes banging on about stuff. And then we're going to do an activity for as long as it kind of takes, we'll see. But we're going to, on our worksheet, we're actually going to split up in couples at the end of this. And we are going to ask each other and ourselves some kind of deep questions. So I apologise in advance. If anyone runs out of the room crying, you can find me. I'll be your support. So we are going to do a bit of an activity because Andrew and I thought it was really important rather than you sit here sort of for 45 minutes to an hour just listening to us two, because we're by no means experts. It would be nice to actually talk to each other about it and really consolidate what you've learnt today and kind of take something home, okay? Really important. So before I get to that, I've got one more point, okay? But I just want to recap the first 2 points quickly to wake you up. So we said marriage was a doorway to what? Holiness. No, marriage is a doorway to, remember? Being loved by a perfect God, not an imperfect spouse. Okay? And then we said marriage is a full-length what? Mirror. Yeah. It is a full-length mirror, especially when you ask your husband, do I look fat in this? Husbands never answer the question. It is a trick question. You will be in big trouble if you say yes, okay? I'm telling you from experience. All right. So the third and final point, guys, and this point actually blew my mind, okay? When I read the book, I reread it, obviously in preparation for this. And when I started doing some research into this point, it actually kind of blew my mind. So stay with me. The third and final thing in our topic about marriage being a doorway to God is this point. Marriage is a gateway into an arena. So does everyone know what an arena is? It's like a big stadium, you know, kind of like the ancient one in the picture up there, okay? Marriage is a gateway into an arena where we battle our own selfishness. Okay, and I'll tell you why it blew my mind in a sec. Next slide. All right. In our Orthodox church, so you can see the beautiful monk there, there's a lot of talk about monasticism and the rite of monasticism and how beautiful it is to lead a celibate life and run away from the cares of the world to the desert and to seek God. Okay, and at times, I've got to say, it's a tempting proposition, isn't it? But not a lot in our church, and there's a lot of reasons why. There hasn't been so much focus on a deep spiritual life in your married life, okay? In actual fact, if you go back and read some of the early church fathers and things like that, you find that they do say that kind of marriage is kind of the lesser path. They don't say it in so many words, but like there's monasticism, and then if you couldn't do that, you kind of get married. It's kind of by default, okay? Even Jesus Christ himself was single. So it's kind of awkward. We're trying to model ourselves on Jesus, but he never got married. What's that about? And St. Paul, greatest apostle that ever was also single. He actually said, "For I wish that all men were even as I myself," referring to his singlehood. And later he said, "It's good for them if they remain as I am." So he actually said, it's pretty cool if you stay in your bachelorhood. Not for any of the reasons that we think about today, okay? It was to serve God, okay, unhindered. But, you know, denying yourself for Christ and taking up your cross and following him is also a command of the Bible, okay? And that's for everyone. So I want to go into this a little bit deeper. St. John Chrysostom, one of the great writers of our church, the Golden Mouth, actually literally called marriage an arena. He said it's a place that we go and we battle it out for our salvation, okay? And he said that arena is for monks, it's for married people, it's for lay people, it's for single people. We're all battling out, okay, for the same thing. So there's something in this. There's something in this monasticism versus marriage thing. I think the problem is, if we don't look deeply at this, we can kind of be forgiven for thinking that if we've taken kind of a relaxed road to salvation by getting married, then a little bit less is expected of us from a Christian point of view. And I do think this is a prevalent thought. I think I thought this myself, that, you know, I'm I'm not a nun. So therefore, I'll battle out my salvation, but kind of not in the same way that a nun does, because she's a nun, right? She's pure, she's pure-hearted, she's gone off to the desert. But as I researched this point, I realised I'm actually grossly incorrect, okay? We are actually called to the same Christian, working out of our Christian salvation as the monks and nuns. He said, we got to do it, being married to imperfect people, and we also got to help them do it too. I don't know, I kind of think it's harder to be married, just my opinion. Okay, so let's keep going. St. John also says, you certainly deceive yourself and are greatly mistaken if you think that there is one set of requirements for the person in the world, sorry, spelling error, and another for the monk. The difference between them is that one is married and the other is not. In all other respects, they will have to render the same account at the end of our lives, okay? For all people, we must reach the same point. And this is what throws everything into disorder. The idea that only the monk is required to show a greater perfection, while the rest of us are allowed to live in laxity. But this is not true. It is not, he says. Rather, Paul says that the same philosophy is demanded of us all. Okay? We're all going to give the same account. Okay? And another Orthodox writer said the married people seek out their salvation and create their church in their home. The only difference with the monk is he creates his church in the desert. So it's just a place. Okay? So we're actually on the same level, and the same is expected of us. Wow. Told you I blew my mind. Anybody else blown? You all knew this? No. Yes, it's like high level stuff, yeah? I feel nervous. Okay, marriage is to your spiritual life what monasticism is to the monks and nuns. And I love this quote, okay? St. Theophan the Recluse. There are lay women in coloured dresses that are nuns in spirit. And there are monastics in black mantles, so what the nuns wear, who are lay women at heart. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, nice. Let's keep going. So how do we do this? How do we become as kind of holy as the monks and nuns? This is a big ask, okay? So we do this by realising that less is not expected of us. We actually have to have that spiritual shift, okay? Married Christians have the same responsibility to labour perpetually, to conquer their own selfishness and passions, and to die unto themselves. Whoa. Okay. We all joke when, people get married that it's martyrdom. You know how, you guys have heard that joke. Sodib. For those of you who don't speak English, it's my cross to bear. We say it in jest, okay? But how many of us really take that to heart? That I really have to die to my own selfishness. I'm very bad at this. And to my own passions and to my own desires, and literally die to that and literally give myself up for my partner and for God. Woo! Yeah, hard work. Let's keep going. So you've got to die to yourself. I love this quote by a 17th century author, Francis de Sales. He says, marriage might be the most difficult ministry you ever take, okay? The most difficult station you can choose is to become a husband and wife. Why didn't they tell us that before we got married? They sold us lies about romance. They didn't tell us it was going to be this hardcore. Some of us would have went to the desert. Okay, all right. The state of marriage is one that requires a constancy beyond any other. It requires mortification of self, dying to yourself, denying yourself. This is a difficult trial. And it's not a one-time event. You can't sort of wake up in the morning and be like, today's the day. I'm facing my martyrdom. It's a once and final station. No, this is kind of like every day, all the time, for as long as we're married. Whew, tiring. Okay. So, but in my research, which was fantastic, I did find a lot of Orthodox writers who then kind of changed their mind about this marriage thing later on and said, hey, it's actually quite an extreme thing that you're entering in terms of the spiritual arena. And I found this beautiful book. For those of you who are into reading, please buy it, because I downloaded it. Marriage as a Path to Holiness by David and Mary Ford. In it is 180 examples of married saints. It's amazing. I mean, we hear about Zacchaeus and Elizabeth and Priscilla and Aquila, the kind of the standard ones. But when I went into here, I realised there was a saint in there called Saint Mary the New. I don't know much about her, but allegedly she was so holy. She's an Orthodox saint from Russia. She was so holy that after she died, she appeared to her husband, asked him to make a church in her name, and her husband, was putting this church together, and a bunch of monks heard about this, cheeky, and they got together and they're like, we don't believe about these apparitions. How could a married woman become a saint when she was living in the world, she wasn't fasting all the time, she was living the full married life? How could a busy woman be a saint and appear to this man when we, who live in the monastery, are so holy and have dedicated everything to God? So she did what, all kind of saints do. She appeared to them and was like, don't you go dissing me. I was holy because I loved my husband. I was holy because I was pure-hearted, okay? And she observed her relationship with God. So interesting that she was a married saint and that there is a church in her name, okay? Sorry, can we go back? There were other examples. Now, you guys know the story of St. Macarius the Great? That an angel appeared to him and did what? Does anyone know?
2 women in Alexandria.
Sorry?
2 women in Alexandria?
Yes, tell us, Rafi, what happened?
Well, apparently it was St. Macarius who was praying, and an angel appeared to him and he said, look, you haven't...
Oh, yeah.
I think he asked to see what level he's on at the moment
As a saint?
Yeah, as a saint. And then one of the angels appeared to him and he said, you never been to the level of the 2 women living in Alexandria. They're just 2 normal women with kids and stuff. And he was so curious to see the 2 women, and he went actually down to Alexandria and he saw the 2 women. Very simple, very humble 2 women. And he was actually...
They were married?
Because
Yeah.
they were married and they've got kids and everything. So he went and asked them, what are you doing in your life? They said, nothing. We just love each other. They are 2, I think they were... Married to 2 brothers. Yeah, married to 2 brothers. And they were feeding... So, for example, if she sees one of the kids of her, of the other woman, hungry, she actually feeds them from her breast milk, and vice versa. So they went to a love level to the extent that they don't differentiate between the kids of each other, and that's how they went to that level.
Yeah, thanks, Rafi. No, it's perfect. It's beautiful. So like that, Rafi said that the angel of the Lord took him to this family's house and showed them that they were living a simple and very loving, very godly way of life, even though they were married. And in the end, so the story goes that he actually prayed to God to give him the same love as these married couples had, because he realised God showed him that, you think you're doing all right, but you weren't. And the same thing happened to St. Anthony the Great. An angel also appeared to him and showed him that there was a doctor also living in the city, I think in a rural city maybe, can't remember exactly, and that doctor was more pious than he was, and it caused St. Anthony to reflect. So, really interesting, okay? Yeah, we're going to wrap up. So true manhood. True manhood is shown not in the choice of a celibate life. On the contrary, the prize in the contest of men is won by him who has trained himself by the discharge of duties as a husband and a father, and by the supervision of a household, regardless of the pleasure and pain. It is won by him. I say, who in the midst of this solicitude for his family shows himself inseparable from the love of God. St. Clement of Alexandria. So, you can insert wife there as well. Beautiful. So marriage is a selfless life, okay? Every day a husband and a wife should appear to each other as new, extraordinary beings. The only way of achieving this is let both deepen their spiritual life and strive in the hard task of self-development. Every day. Okay, and that's not self-development like in the Anthony Robbins kind of way. It's self-development in the self-mortification kind of way. Dying to yourself and becoming new every day. So it's a really high standard. Let's keep going, I think we're nearly there. So I wanted to just offer some practical things about this, because when I was reading it, I was like feeling a little despondent. I was like, ooh, I got a long way to go to dying to myself, and then goes all my shopping ideas and stuff like that. So it was really kind of challenging. So I wanted to leave you with a few practical ways. Can anyone share an idea, actually, before I put them on the screen? What's a practical way of kind of dying unto yourself every day? Anyone? I'll give you one from recent history. I had a baby last year, and everyone warned me about how sleep deprived I would be. But sorry, pregnant people in the room. Man, it hits you like a ton of bricks, okay? So it's really challenging, okay? The sleep deprivation is really, really kind of traumatizing. Everybody who here's had a child knows how hard it is. Do you think if I was too tired, like, you know, the baby cries, and Ange got up at 3 a.m, that, like, you know, he had work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and he got up to see the baby, that might be kind of a form of self-denial. Yeah, dude, he wants to sleep, yeah? And he did that on numerous occasions so that I could rest, even though I had nowhere to be in the morning except mumming, but I was so shattered, like beyond shattered. Do you think that that might, in the eyes of God, be like him getting up at 3 a.m. and doing a couple of matanyas and a prayer? Maybe. Okay, let's be practical. When somebody goes against the grain and gets up in the middle of the night and goes to see the crying baby, that is a form of self-denial. Okay, something else? Anything else? Oh, there's a car that needs to be moved. ICZ8WD. Hyundai? Anyone? No? Maybe they're not in this room. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, some more examples. What about biting your tongue in an argument when you really want to kind of have the final say? Or where you really believe you're right, because you're never wrong, but you bite your tongue. Might that be a form of self-denial? Yeah, this high-level stuff. Okay. What about, I don't know, doing the dishes? Just an idea, fellas, without being asked. That might be nice. Okay. What about, this is never going to happen, switching off the cricket because your wife wants to talk? Could that be a form of self-denial? Yeah, it could. Okay. And the last one, what about if you're tempted kind of to look at something on the internet that you shouldn't be looking at? Even though no one is there to see you, you might deny yourself that because you know that you have a wife and you have a God that's watching you. Okay? So these are like kind of practical ideas of denying yourself every day. Okay? None of us are going to leave for the desert, and I don't want anybody threatening in the next argument. I'm going to the desert is way easier than living with you. Okay? Because I don't want you doing that. All right, so in order to love one another, we must renounce ourselves completely. Massive. All right, I'm going to leave it there because you're getting a bit restless and it's getting warm in this room. Can we please get into our couples with our worksheets? Who here doesn't have their couple? Anyone single today?
Yeah, single.
Mar.
Or accepted in the church.
She might have to work on her own. I mean, you can join a couple, but the questions are a little confronting. So you might have to maybe work through it. And then take them to Wes and be like, I've worked things out for us, Wes. Before we split up, do you have any questions? All right, we're going to maybe take 15, 20 minutes and we're going to work on our worksheet. Feel free to move around the room. Does anyone need a pen? No?